There is a science to creating a smell that can never be erased. It's not about simple rot. It's about chemistry, biology, and opportunity. It requires the right ingredients, proteins that break down into uniquely offensive sulfurous compounds. It requires a catalyst, like intense, oppressive heat, to accelerate the microbial process. And it requires a vessel, an enclosed space where the odor can embed itself into every fiber, every molecule, becoming a permanent, unscrubbable part of the environment. My revenge was not an act of passionate, screaming rage. It was a chemistry experiment. I created a potion so foul, so primally disgusting, that it would serve as a constant, lingering reminder of a rotten secret. A secret that my husband and my dearest friend thought they could keep hidden. They were wrong. Their betrayal was a sickness, and I simply gave it a scent. The targets of my experiment were my soon-to-be ex-husband, Leo, and my then-best friend, Jenna. The vessel was her minivan, the very symbol of her wholesome, suburban motherhood. Our story was meant to be a fairy tale. We were two couples, brought together by friendship, who built our lives side by side. Our children were playmates. Our homes were extensions of each other's. We even entrusted her, a lawyer, with the legal framework of our family business. It was under the guise of protecting that business that she and my husband conducted their affair, billing their late nights and out-of-town trips to our company's expense account. They used my trust as a shield and my money as a hotel voucher. They thought their betrayal was clever and concealed. But they forgot about the science of decay and the creative ingenuity of a woman who had just had her entire world destroyed. Our story began, ironically, at a celebration of love and fidelity. My best friend from college was marrying his, and I was the maid of honor to her matron of honor, while Leo was the best man. We were a cliché, the perfect pairing that falls into place while celebrating another perfect pairing. There was an immediate, easy chemistry between us. He was charming and confident, and I was drawn to his ambition. We spent the entire wedding weekend talking, laughing, and mapping out a future that seemed not just possible, but inevitable. We were the story people told after the wedding, and you'll never guess. The best man and the maid of honor hit it off, too. It was a storybook beginning, a foundation so seemingly perfect and romantic that I never thought to question its integrity. We were building our house on what I thought was solid rock, never realizing it was a carefully disguised sinkhole. The four of us became an inseparable unit. We moved into the same idyllic community, our houses just a few streets apart. We had our children in the same 5-year window, creating a built-in tribe of cousins and playmates. Our lives were a constant, happy blur of shared experiences. We hosted joint birthday parties for the kids, spent long summer weekends barbecuing in each other's backyards, and celebrated every holiday together. They weren't just our friends, they were our family. David, her husband, was like a brother to me, and Jenna was my sister in every way that mattered. We were creating a shared history, weaving our lives together so tightly that the thought of ever untangling them was unimaginable. It was the kind of deep, multi-family friendship that people dream of, and it made the eventual betrayal feel not like a simple affair, but like a civil war that destroyed 2 nations from within. My friendship with Jenna was the bedrock of my adult life. She was my person. She was the one I called at 3 a.m. when my firstborn had a fever. She was the one who brought over a bottle of wine and a compassionate ear when my own mother was driving me crazy. We shared everything. Our fears about motherhood, our career ambitions, our secret insecurities. We had a shorthand, an ability to understand each other with a single look. We promised each other we would be the crazy old ladies sitting on a porch together one day, laughing about our husbands and our lives. The trust between us was absolute, unconditional, and pure. I leaned on it, I cherished it, and I never, ever questioned it. She held all of my secrets, all of my vulnerabilities, which, as it turned out, made her the most dangerous enemy I could ever have. So, when my husband and I decided to franchise our growing business, hiring Jenna as our attorney felt like the most logical, natural decision in the world. Who could we possibly trust more to protect our family's financial future than our best friend, a woman who was essentially our family herself? We were proud to give her the business. It felt like another beautiful way our lives were intertwining, another shared success story. She was brilliant, and she dove into the work with an enthusiasm I mistook for professional dedication. She drafted the contracts, she handled the legal frameworks, she became an indispensable part of our company. I saw her as our guardian, our legal protector. I never imagined that she was using her privileged position to meticulously plan the hostile takeover of my life. The first signs of trouble were so subtle, I barely registered them. It started with the late nights at our office. Leo and Jenna would be there for hours, supposedly hammering out the kinks in franchise agreements. I'd bring them dinner sometimes, playing the supportive wife and friend, proud of their collaborative energy. Then, the inside jokes started. Little legal or business, related quips they would share at dinner parties, followed by a shared glance that momentarily excluded David and me. I remember walking into our home office one evening to find them huddled close together over a document, their heads almost touching. They sprang apart when they saw me, their laughter a little too loud, their explanation a little too detailed. A tiny, cold worm of suspicion wiggled in my gut, but I crushed it immediately. This was Leo. This was Jenna. I was being paranoid. The final stage of the rising conflict was the trips. The business required them to travel to interview prospective franchisees. At first, it was day trips, then overnighters. Then a week-long trip to New York was planned. They presented it as a massive, crucial step for the business. They booked flights and a hotel, all on the company card. I helped my husband pack, neatly folding the shirts he would wear while he was sleeping with my best friend. David and I joked about being work widows. For the week, planning to get the kids together while they were gone. We were playing our roles perfectly in a drama whose script we hadn't been allowed to read. We were the supportive, trusting spouses, waving them off on a business trip that was nothing but a carefully orchestrated, fully funded romantic getaway. The New York trip was billed as the pinnacle of their hard work, the final push to take our franchising dream to the next level. I remember the morning they left. Jenna came over to our house so they could share a cab to the airport. She gave me a big theatrical hug, whispering, "Wish us luck! We're gonna kill it for the family!" The word, family, hung in the air, thick with a duplicity I could feel but not yet name. I watched them get into the cab, my husband and my best friend sitting side by side, looking for all the world like a power couple off to conquer the city. I stood at the door, waving, a supportive smile plastered on my face, while a cold, sick feeling churned in my stomach. I told myself it was just nerves about the business, a foolish attempt to deny the real, terrifying truth that was clawing at the edges of my consciousness. The call came on the third day of their trip. It was David, Jenna's husband. His voice was quiet, strained, stripped of its usual cheerful energy. "Clara," he said, and I could hear the effort it took for him to speak. "Why need to talk? Are you sitting down?" My heart began to hammer against my ribs. I sank onto a kitchen chair, my hand trembling. He told me he'd had a suspicion for months, a gut feeling that he had tried to ignore, just like I had. But unlike me, he had taken action. He couldn't live with the uncertainty anymore. He had hired a private investigator. The words hung in the air, clinical and brutal. He had hired a professional to follow his wife and my husband. He then proceeded to read me the investigator's report, his voice flat and detached, as if reading a weather forecast. The report was a detailed, soul-crushing chronicle of their betrayal. The detective had followed them from the airport. He documented them holding hands in the back of the cab. He photographed them sharing a romantic, candlelit dinner, my husband's hand resting intimately on my best friend's arm. And then came the final, irrefutable evidence, the detail that vaporized any lingering hope I had. The investigator confirmed they had checked into the hotel together, into a single room. One king-sized bed. They weren't just sharing late nights at the office. They were sharing a life, a secret world built on a foundation of our money and their lies. After I hung up the phone with David, I sat in my kitchen in complete silence for what felt like an hour. The world had gone quiet, the colors bleached from my vision. Every sound was magnified, the hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the clock on the wall, the frantic, terrified beating of my own heart. I looked at the family photos arranged on the fridge. There we were, the four of us at a pumpkin patch. There were our kids, all piled together at a birthday party. Every happy memory was now a scene in a tragedy, a lie I had willingly participated in. The grief was a physical thing, a crushing weight on my chest that made it impossible to breathe. It was a pain so profound, so all-encompassing, that I thought it would kill me. But then, something else began to bubble up through the grief. It was a different kind of emotion, something cold and sharp and clarifying. It was rage, a pure, unadulterated fury that burned away the shock and the sorrow. How dare they? How dare they use our friendship, our children's lives, our shared history as a playground for their sordid little romance? How dare they make me feel like I was the crazy one, the paranoid one, for sensing their deceit? The victimhood I felt just moments before began to curdle and harden into something else entirely. It was resolve. They had declared war on my life, and I would not be a conscientious objector. I would fight back. I stood up from the kitchen table and walked to the window. It was a sweltering July day, the kind of oppressive heat that makes the air feel thick and heavy. I looked out at the street, at the shimmering pavement, and my eyes landed on Jenna's minivan. She had left it parked in front of her house, just across the way. And then I saw it. A small detail that would change everything. The front passenger side window was cracked open, just a couple of inches to let the hot air escape. It was an invitation, an opportunity, a fatal flaw in her otherwise perfect suburban fast aid. And as I stared at that 2-inch gap, a plan began to form in my mind, a plan that was petty, disgusting, and in its own way, absolutely perfect. I was no longer just a victim. I was becoming a scientist of revenge. My transformation from heartbroken wife to biological warfare strategist was swift and silent. I didn't scream or cry or throw things. I walked to my refrigerator with the calm, deliberate focus of a surgeon preparing for a complex operation. I knew what I needed: something organic, something potent, something that would harness the power of the oppressive July heat and turn her minivan into a rolling testament to her rotten character. My eyes landed on a package of raw shrimp I had bought for a pala I now had no intention of making. Perfect. The proteins in shellfish, when allowed to decay, produce some of the most uniquely nauseating compounds known to man. But shrimp alone wasn't enough. I needed a liquid medium to ensure it would seep deep into the carpet fibers, beyond the reach of any cleaning product. Chicken broth from the pantry would do nicely. I put the raw shrimp and a generous amount of chicken broth into the blender. The same blender I had used to make smoothies for my children that very morning. I pressed the puree button and listened to the clinical, mechanical whir as it created my disgusting potion. The resulting slurry was a nauseating, pinkish liquid. I carefully strained out the solid bits, leaving only the concentrated, super potent essence of decay. My weapon was ready. The next step was delivery. I found a long, thin tube from a fish tank pump in the garage and a small funnel from the kitchen. Armed with my vial of vengeance and my delivery system, I waited for the cover of darkness. This wasn't an act of passion, it was a mission. Under the cloak of a moonless, humid night, I slipped out of my house and crept across the street. The world was silent, save for the chirping of crickets. I approached the dark, looming shape of Jenna's minivan, my heart pounding with a mixture of fear and exhilarating purpose. The window was still open, just as I had seen, It was a tiny sliver of opportunity. I carefully threaded the long, thin tube through the gap, painstakingly maneuvering it down into the dark interior. I aimed for the rear passenger side carpet, a place no one ever thinks to look, and a place not protected by removable rubber mats. I worked the end of the tube under the seat as best I could, ensuring the payload would be delivered to the most inaccessible spot possible. With the delivery system in place, I held my breath and began the final phase of the operation. I attached the funnel to the top of the tube and, with a slow, steady hand, began to pour my potion. I watched as about half a cup of the putrid, shrimp-infused chicken broth gurgled down the tube and disappeared into the dark recesses of her car. It made no sound. It left no visible trace. It was a perfect, silent crime. I carefully extracted the tube, wiped down any prints or drips from the window, and crept back to my own house, my heart singing a song of grim satisfaction. I meticulously washed the blender, the funnel, and the tube, erasing all evidence of my work. The trap was set. Now, all I had to do was let nature and the 90-degree heat do the rest. A few days later, Leo and Jenna returned from their business trip. They were tan and glowing, full of fake stories about their meetings and their successes. I played my part beautifully. I listened with feigned interest, asked the appropriate questions, and welcomed my husband home as if my world hadn't been shattered into a million pieces. Inside, however, I was a different person. I was no longer just a victim. I was a co-conspirator in a much larger plot. The day after they returned, I overheard Jenna on the phone in her driveway, complaining to someone about a weird, fishy smell in her van that she couldn't locate. I had to turn away to hide my smile. The potion was working. My secret, silent revenge was beginning to bloom. That phone call with David had forged a new, powerful alliance. Our shared betrayal became our bond. We were no longer just two wounded spouses. We were a strategic team with a common objective. We met in secret at a coffee shop in a neighboring town, our conversations low and urgent. We weren't there to cry or commiserate. We were there to plan. We compared notes, shared information, and began to map out a coordinated legal attack. He had the detective's report. I had intimate knowledge of our business's finances. We realized that our pain, when combined with our knowledge, was an incredibly powerful weapon. We were not going to let them control the narrative of our divorces. Our first and most brilliant strategic move was a quiet legal blitzkrieg. Acting on a tip from a lawyer friend of David's, we spent the next 2 weeks systematically setting up consultation appointments with every single top-rated divorce attorney in our city and the surrounding counties. We didn't hire them. We simply had a 1-hour consultation, paid the fee, and established attorney-client privilege. By the time Leo and Jenna were finally served with divorce papers and started scrambling to find representation, they discovered that every good lawyer in town was already conflicted out. They were legally barred from taking their cases because they had already consulted with us. They were left with the dregs of the legal profession while we had our choice of the very best. It was our first joint victory, a move so cold, so calculated, and so effective that it set the tone for everything that was to come. The day we finally confronted them was not filled with yelling or tears. It was a quiet, coordinated detonation. David and I had spent weeks with our respective, excellent lawyers, meticulously preparing. We had our financial documents in order, the detective's report copied and certified, and our petitions filed. On a Tuesday morning, exactly 1 month after their New York trip, they were both served with divorce papers at the same time. He at our office, she at her home. The element of complete surprise was devastating. They had been so wrapped up in the thrill of their secret affair, so confident in our ignorance that they had never even considered the possibility of a coordinated counter-offensive. The panic in their voices when they called each other was, I'm told, a thing to behold. The legal battle was, frankly, a rout. They were completely outmaneuvered at every turn. Their second-rate lawyers were no match for our top, top-tier legal teams. They had been caught in a clear case of infidelity, and they had been foolish enough to use company funds to facilitate it, a fact our business attorney, a new one, obviously, was happy to point out. Their attempts to paint us as vindictive or unreasonable fell flat in the face of our calm, organized, and fact-based approach. We weren't emotional wrecks. We were calculated opponents executing a flawless strategy. They had expected a messy, emotional drama. We gave them a swift, brutally efficient corporate dissolution. In the end, we got everything we wanted in the divorce settlements. We protected our assets, secured favorable custody arrangements, and left them to deal with the personal and professional wreckage they had created. But the true, lingering payoff was the minivan. The smell, as I had scientifically designed, did not fade. It grew. It evolved. It became a living, breathing entity within the vehicle. Jenna, as we heard through the grapevine, tried everything. She had it detailed multiple times, the cleaners emerging from the car, gagging. She had the carpets professionally shampooed, which only seemed to awaken new, more horrifying layers of the stench. She bought dozens of air fresheners, which resulted in a nauseating aroma of artificial pine needles mixed with rotting crustacean. Friends refused to ride with her. She had to drive her own children around in a vehicle that smelled like a biohazard. The car became infamous in our community, a rolling monument to her moral decay. Eventually, defeated and humiliated, she tried to sell it. No dealership would take it as a trade, and after the initial olfactory assessment, she finally had to list it online with a desperate, honest disclosure. Car runs well, but has a persistent, strong odor that cannot be removed. She ended up selling her once pristine, family-friendly minivan for a few $100s to a scrap yard. I don't regret my act of petty, biological warfare for a single second. It was a tangible consequence for an intangible crime. They tried to ruin my life with their lies and deceit. I simply ruined her car with a little bit of shrimp, some chicken broth, and the inescapable power of a hot summer day. It was a triumph of chemistry. It was ghastly. And it was perfect. They say you shouldn't stoop to their level. But when someone has systematically betrayed your trust and tried to dismantle your life from the inside out, sometimes the most appropriate response is not to take the high road, but to get creative on the low road. Justice doesn't always come from a courtroom. Sometimes it's concocted in a blender. My revenge wasn't just about a bad smell. It was about taking a situation where I was a passive victim and becoming an active and very effective agent of consequence. It was a reminder that when someone treats you like garbage, it is not petty to ensure their car forever smells like it. It's poetic justice, served at room temperature and left to fester.